So, here we are, and we will jump right in with the first myth to debunk is that grief follows a straight line or a predictable pattern of some kind. We believe this is because of the 5 stages of grief. We all experience grief. However, each person moves differently. So understanding grief for one isn't the same for another. Grief will usher in a roller coaster of emotions. There's no cookie-cutter healing process. There's no one way to get through it. We learn to accept, adapt, and actualize our new norms with time. So the straightforward treatment pattern myth is debunked. The next one you may find familiar. If you've never said it to someone, maybe someone has to you. The second myth to debunk is that time heals all wounds. We all know that in time, all things are different and new. We can appreciate the efforts in trying to show support to someone grieving, but please don't do this at home. Time is needed to heal, but it's not the only thing that needs to happen. It's important to fill the time with adjusting to your new norms while soul-searching for the perfect way to honor your loved one. We don't want to waste time by just sitting idle. You will need to be prepared to use coping strategies and support. Time will not heal the grief alone. When grief isn't addressed and time passes, it passes, and grief doesn't get any easier. We can now say that the time heals all wounds myth is debunked. Our final myth to debunk for this round is grief ends when you move on. Grief doesn't end with one action or the other. Wanting to have a normal schedule doesn't mean grief has left you in peace. The goal of grief isn't for you to let go of your loved one and move on with life. It's the memories that will help you when trying to think of a memorial tribute. Whatever you choose is up to you because, again, this is personal. We believe that life continues, and in that light, may life continue while accepting, adapting, and actualizing your new norm. So, debunked the myth that grief ends when you move on. Let's quickly recap our top 3 debunked myths about grief and loss. We kicked off our debunking of the myth that grief follows a linear, predictable pattern. The reality is, grief is far from being a one-size-fits-all experience. It's an emotional experience that's unique to each person and doesn't follow a set timeline or a fixed order of stages. It can be messy, unpredictable, and just when you think all is good, it loops back to you again. It's important to remember that there's no right or wrong way to grieve. Next up, we debunked the belief that time heals all wounds. While it's true that the intensity of grief can lessen over time, it's not a guaranteed cure-all. Healing isn't just about the passage of time, but also about how you use that time to process your loss, to learn, and to find new ways to remember and honor your loved ones. The pain of loss may never completely disappear, but it can change and become a part of your life in a different and more meaningful way. There's nothing wrong with still feeling the impact of a loss. Lastly, we squashed the notion that grief ends when you move on. This myth can be particularly harmful, as it can pressure those who are grieving to get over it and return to normal. However, the truth is, there's no such thing as moving on from a loss in the sense of forgetting about it, or no longer feeling its impact. Instead, it's about moving forward, carrying the memory of your loved ones with you, and finding ways to honor them in your new life without them. It's about learning to live with the loss, rather than trying to erase it from your life. Understanding these myths and the realities that debunk them are more about fostering compassion and empathy for ourselves and others who are experiencing grief of any kind. Loss is an inevitable part of life, even though we find it difficult to talk about or understand. By debunking these myths, we get to help those that are struggling to accept, adapt, and actualize a new norm. We can create a culture that is more accepting and supportive of the diverse ways in which people experience grief. Be kind to yourself and others as we navigate the terrain to accepting, adapting, and actualizing a new norm.